Let's start this podcast with Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram. Thank you for having me.
Ram was very humanized version of a divine form. So probably that's the one thing that connects us to Lord Ram a lot more.
Everything that Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Rama is enacting for you in his behavior and his conduct.
Because every part has the local dialect, local translation of Valmiki's Ramayana, some loosely translated, and there are translations of the translations.
Ramayana was 7,000 years ago, it was composed. After that, people have retold it and they have added stuff to it and they have changed it. So this Lakshman Rekha is a much later edition. It's not something that's there in Valmiki. So they're chatting. Then suddenly he says, actually, I am not a sannyasi. Actually, I am Raavan of Lanka. And I have this golden kingdom. And I am here because I'm attracted to you and you're a beautiful woman and you should not be here in the forest. You come with me, I'll make you my chief queen. And then she gets furious with him.
Let's talk a bit about Lord Ram's exile.
It was not forced on him. It was his choice. You know, his father told him, don't go. Sri Ram sees Hanuman for the first time, when they meet for the first time. He says, Nan Rigveda Vinitasya, Nan Yajurveda Bharinaha, Na Samaveda Vidushaha, Shakyam Evam Ashitum. It's not my take on the Ramayana. It's not my version of any of the characters. It's not what I think. It's what Valmiki intended.
Priya ma'am, welcome to the iRonik show. And let's start this podcast with Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram. Thank you for having me.
You are living in US, I think, for more than 20-25 years now?
30 years.
30 years.
Yes,
So
yeah.
how someone living in the US, right, so far from India, how do you get this mindset, or what motivated you to write about Ram, for that matter?
So the reason I actually I'm very inspired by the story of Sri Rama is because, I am actually a student of Vedanta. And
Okay.
Vedanta is, as you know, it is the philosophy of the Upanishads, the philosophy of the Vedas. That's what it is. Vedanta is the essence of what is the Veda all about.
Okay.
And I've been studying this now for the past 12 years or so with increasing intensity. And what we don't realize about the Ramayana is that Sri Rama is an exemplar of Vedanta, which means everything that the Upanishads teach you, everything that the Bhagavad Gita says, because Bhagavad Gita is a summary of the Upanishads, actually. So
Right.
everything that Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Rama is enacting for you in his behavior and his conduct.
Okay.
So for me, I saw it as a Vedantic text. That's how I came to the Ramayana. And that's why I'm so fascinated by it. As a student of Vedanta, everything that he does is in line with what Vedanta teaches. So he
Okay.
is like a living example of Vedanta in,
You
in the
know,
book.
I happen to see so many authors now, like yourself, who have excelled in their corporate life and all other aspects of their life, and but somehow they have been attracted to back to the roots, back to Sanatan Dharma. So it was, I think, one of my first 10 episodes. I had a gentleman called Vikrant Pandey.
Mhm.
So I am Bangalore pass out, huge corporate life and everything, left everything, started researching about Ramayan,
Yeah.
followed the entire trail of Ramayan from India to Sri Lanka. So in the
Yes.
path,
Is that the book
so
in the footsteps of?
yeah, absolutely, in the
Yes,
footsteps
yes.
of Ram, in the footsteps
In
of
fact,
Ram.
I bought that book. It's
Okay.
it's very interesting.
I think it was my episode number 8 or 10.
I see.
So I had a really great conversation with Mr. Vikrat
Mm.
Pandey, and there is a really piquing interest in our histories, the ancient histories of India, the sagas of Ramayana,
Yes,
Mahabharat. So
yes.
if we look at our generation, for us, the exposure to Ramayana or Mahabharat was uh, B.R. Chopra's Mahabharat and Ramanand Sagar's Ramayana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now with so many of you coming up with so many different books, and I guess the your book Ram, the Man of Dharma, is again based on Valmiki's Ramayana, which is
Yes,
the base of which is the actual Ramayana as it is told,
the original one.
the original one. So there are so many books. There are
Mm-hmm.
people like Yashodev Devdhar who are narrating the Ramayana in their
Yes,
own way, which is again Valmiki's Ramayana. So
yes.
what prompted you to again come up with this book? Because there is so much material now available today on the internet as well on the bookshelves.
True. So, the thing with the Rama story, the Ramayana, is
Hmm.
that it's been told and retold over the last 7,000 years,
Absolutely.
um, in different languages, in different countries, and different versions. You see,
Hmm. Hmm.
when we say the Ramayana, the actual Ramayana is the Valmiki Ramayana. That is the
Absolutely.
one that is Itihas. The
Hmm.
Valmiki Ramayana, that's the only one that's Itihas. All the others, there are retellings, but they have not, a lot of them, they don't stick to the whole story in entirety, the way Valmiki told it. So, what
Okay.
has happened with the retellings is they have changed episodes. They have changed it a lot of times with the bhakti bhav.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
that changes the way that the story comes across. I'll give you an example. For instance, in if you read Valmiki's Ramayana, it is very real. So, you won't have a lot of, there are no miracles that happen there. So,
Right.
in other Ramayanas, you will find that, when they build the Setu, they say that they write Sri Ram on the Patthar. And because they've written Sri Ram, because of his divinity,
Hmm.
those stones float,
Float.
right? That's what we've heard, that they
That's a
but
common
you will not
narrative.
find that in Valmiki Ramayana. In Valmiki Ramayana, that Setu is built with effort, with human effort. So it's
It was the
not built,
marvelous engineering of that time.
it was an engineering feat, but it was a effort to build it. It wasn't done with any miracle. It wasn't that the stones just floated. And see, that was written later from the
Hmm.
mode of bhakti to show, the divinity, Sri Rama's divinity. And he was divine. Even in Valmiki Ramayana,
Hmm.
he's a avatar of Vishnu, he's divine. The difference is in Valmiki Ramayana, he doesn't know it. He does
Yes.
not know
Yes.
that he is divine. He was born because Raavan had that boon that nobody could kill him
Yeah.
except a human being. That was the only loophole in that Vardhan that he took
Right.
from Brahma, is that I will not be killed by anybody except human being. And the reason he said he left that loophole is because he was so arrogant. He said that human beings can't do anything to me.
Hmm.
So why
Hmm.
should I worry about them? You know?
Right. And
So that was the thing. But in in the other Ramayanas, they portray him with a divinity. So,
right.
like for instance, he knows in some Ramayanas um, that Sita is going to be kidnapped. So he does an exchange of a Maya Sita with the real Sita. So she doesn't get kidnapped. She goes to Agni. And then when the Agnipariksha happens, it's just an exchange.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
real Sita comes out of Agni, that Maya Sita goes. That's not there in Valmiki. You
Hmm.
see, there's none of all that thing. It's very real. The story, if you read it, actually, it really touches your heart because it comes across as a very human story. You relate to Sri
Right.
Rama as a amazing, amazing human being. That is the difference when you read it.
I shouldn't say this popular, but if you look at the mainstream deities like
Hmm.
Shri Ram, Shivji, Hanumanji, so these are some of the very Krishniji for that matter. So these are the
Yes,
very few popular, deities out there in the Indian context.
right.
And what is said about, and the thing that you said, that Ram was very humanized version of a divine form. So probably that's the one thing that connects us to Lord Ram a lot more,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Then what you mentioned about Valmiki and the, overall the bridge story and everything. So if I'm not wrong, please correct me if I go haywire, because I'm not an expert in this field. So I think Valmiki lived, Sage Valmiki lived in the same era as Lord Ram. So
Yes,
what he has written is more of an autobiography of Sri Ram.
yes, a biography.
It's biography of Sri Ram. It's not a very, masala story added with lot of miracles, lot of magics. It's
No,
actually what he has seen. Correct
yes.
me if I'm wrong,
And
and if you would like to add something.
you're absolutely right. The Valmiki Ramayana starts with that. That
Yeah.
context is set right in the beginning, because if you see the first verse, you know,
Hmm.
is that Valmiki asks his guru Narada. He says, "Kon vasmin sampratam loke, gunavan kasya viryavan," which means, who is there who lives sampratam loke? Sampratam means in our time,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
now. Who is living? Who is a, gunavan person? Who is a great person of great
Okay.
character? He asked that question. So he's telling you right away that he's talking about someone who's a contemporary. He's
Hmm. Hmm.
talking about someone who's a real person, because he's asking that. He says, I want, and the reason he's asking that is because he wants to write about a person of Dharma. He wants to write about Dharma. See, the whole
Okay.
reason for the Ramayana is not for entertainment. It is a very entertaining story,
Hmm.
but the purpose was not entertainment with which it was written.
Okay.
You see, Valmiki didn't write it. B.R. Chopra and all these. This is all very exciting, for us to watch it on screen.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
But that is done for entertainment. Valmiki composed the Ramayana to teach Dharma. There's a different purpose.
Right.
And what is Dharma? Dharma is the right thing to do. And it's very important to understand the definition of Dharma, because Dharma is not religion. We in Hindi, when we say Dharma,
Yeah.
we tend to think of it as religion. But in Sanskrit, Dharma is not religion. In Sanskrit, it is the right thing to do in that context, which is for the general good, not for your
Okay.
personal good, but for parokar.
Hmm.
That's what the purpose of dharma is. Dharma is any good action, the right thing to do in the circumstance which is for the general good. And no one was a better practitioner of dharma than Sri Rama. You see?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
he was someone who understood the meaning of dharma. And
Okay.
dharma is not easy to understand. It is different from morality. You know, we often confuse the two.
Right. Right.
But dharma and morality, there is some overlap, but they are actually quite different. And I'll tell you why. Morality is to do with rules.
Right.
Dharma is to do with exercising your intelligence and deciding when to break the rules and when to follow them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You see, that is the difference. And so to be in my book, I call the book Rama a man of dharma, and those words are chosen very intentionally, because that's what he was. He was a very dharmic person, which means not that he followed rules. He was not a person who just, like, okay, I have to do this because, this is what is prescribed,
Right.
not at all. He was a person who understood when to do what, when to follow the rule, when to break the rule. And even more than in the Ramayana, you have that in the Mahabharata with Sri Krishna.
Right.
Sri
Yeah.
Krishna, many times broke the
Hmm.
the rules, for the purpose of dharma. You see, it's a very confusing concept for us to understand in our modern times. You know why? Because the way we have um, sort of grown up in modern times is not with our concept of dharma. We have been distanced from our heritage. So, what we understand today is only right and wrong. Morality.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is moral, this is immoral. This is good, this is bad. Dharma is not that. Dharma is okay, it's good in this context, it may not be good in another context.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. So you see, in say in the modern days, okay, if there's a terrorist,
Hmm.
I'm just giving this example of dharma. If there's a terrorist who is killing lots of people, okay, he's on the rampage, he's killing people.
Hmm.
Ideally, according to all laws, you should capture him and take him to trial. Ideally,
Right.
right? But what happens is sometimes you can't do that. So what do? You then maybe do a covert operation. We had a case where,
Hmm.
the United States went in the middle of the night
Yes.
and took
Yes.
out, Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden.
Now, if you look at it, technically speaking,
Hmm.
that was not really right. Why? Because he was sleeping.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was middle of the night. It was an ambush. They did not take him to a court of law.
Hmm. Hmm.
But still, you would say, from a dharma point of view, that is dharma. Why? Because it's for the good of the many. Because
Right.
that one
In the
person,
overall context, it was the right thing to do.
overall context, it is dharma, even though it is not the right thing to do. So, and now I'll take you the example from the Ramayana, where this is shown. So,
Hmm.
Sri Rama kills Vali. You know that whole
Yes.
story.
Yes. Yes.
Now, how does he kill Vali? Sugriva is fighting with
Hmm.
Vali, and
Hmm.
Sri Rama shoots him unseen from a tree. He's hiding behind a tree.
Right.
So he's not in front of Vali. He shoots him in the chest, but he shoots him from an unseen vantage point.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, that, according to the dharma of battle, is not okay.
Absolutely.
So you can ask, how come Sri Rama did that when he's such a dharmatma? How come he did that? Isn't that wrong? And
Hmm.
if you ask the question, Vali himself asked that question to Sri Rama. He said to him, he says, I thought you were
Hmm.
a great dharmatma. How come you didn't face me? I was fighting with Sugriva. You shot me from, without my knowing it. So this is unacceptable. And I thought you were this great person and all this. Sri Rama explains to him the meaning of dharma. So Vali had a necklace. He could not be killed by anybody who stood in front of him because the power of the necklace was it would sap the strength of whoever was
Hmm.
standing in front of
Hmm.
him. Vali would get that person's strength. So if Sri Rama had stood in front of him, then Sri Rama's strength would have gone to Vali.
Right.
It would have gone. Then what is the purpose of that? Right? So the thing is, in this context where Vali needed to be removed, why? Because Vali had committed a grave sin. He had kidnapped Sugriv's wife, Roma,
Wife. Yeah.
and he had taken her as his own. And this was a double crime. One, because you don't take any woman against her will, and
Against her will. Hmm.
that is straight away a no-no. And even more that egregious was the fact that Ruma was Sugriv's wife, and Sugriv was Vali's younger brother.
Hmm.
A younger brother's wife in our shastras is supposed to be treated as a daughter-in-law, a daughter or a daughter-in-law, because an elder brother is like a father, right? Younger brother is like a son. So you cannot just take his wife. It's a crime of incest. Technically speaking, it
Right.
comes under the crime of, you can't do that. So that crime had to be punished by death. Now you can't do it because you can't do it. Just as I said, you can't maybe not get a terrorist and take him to court. You have to do it surreptitiously. You have to do it
Absolutely.
in what you would call technically not a moral way. But for the greater good, Vali had to be taken out. And so Sri Rama was faced with a Dharma Sankat. On the one hand was the rules of battle, which said, when two people are fighting, a third person doesn't interfere.
Right.
And when you fight with somebody, you face them. This is the rule he broke.
Yeah.
But he broke this dharma for a higher dharma. And the higher dharma was to give justice to Rama, right? And to chastise Vali. Because as a Kshatriya, Kshatriyas in those days had this role of justice. They were of enforcing justice. So for that reason, there were these two dharmas, the dharma of enforcing justice, the dharma of battle. You can only pick one.
Right.
So he picked the dharma of justice and he let go of the dharma of battle in this context. Only in this context. In another context, he maintained the dharma of battle. In the Valmiki Ramayana, and I'll tell you that because you'll see the contrast there. In other Ramayanas, Ram and Raavan face each other only once in the battle.
Okay. Yeah.
In Valmiki Ramayana, they face each other twice. So right in the beginning itself, quite soon, just before Kumbhakarna comes, just before that Kumbhakarna episode, Raavan decides, I'm going to go out and deal with this myself. So he comes. And there's a big battle. And between Ram and Raavan, there's this big battle. And in that battle, Sri Ram throws Raavan off his chariot. He's lying on the on the battlefield without his crown, without his weapon, and what Sri Ram says? He says, "I came today. I was wanting to kill you, but it's against my battle dharma to kill a person who does not have his weapon and who's in this condition of helplessness." So he says, "You go back. Look at his etiquette, huh? You go back to Lanka. Come back tomorrow after you have rested, and we will have a fair fight."
Right.
So
Now,
this is.
if you just compare it to what happened in Mahabharat, the
Mhm.
overall Karn and Arjun episode, how Karn dies, right? So now, if you look at, now, people will start questioning, is that dharma? Now, again, in that context, if Shri Krishna would have said, Arjun, this is not, Arjuna said that this is not against, this is not as per the battle dharma, as we are talking about, then Shri Krishna said, if
Karna says that actually.
sorry, if Karn is in his normal position where he's not vulnerable, you will not never be able to defeat him, right? Now, in that context, what Shri Krishna suggested Arjuna and to kill Karn when he was fixing his chariot was the right thing to do in that overall context, in that limited context.
So, it's good you brought that up because that is another sort of incident which a lot of people debate on in this
Yes, yes.
Mahabharata incident. It's very interesting. And, if you go back to the Mahabharata, it's interesting what um, Sri Krishna tells Karna, because Karna he says when he's doing that, he knows he's in a vulnerable position, right? So he says to Arjuna, he says, you should not shoot me now because I'm in this vulnerable position. And as a, Dharma says that you should not do it. The Dharma of battle is that Dharma says that you should not shoot a person. And he's absolutely right. That's what Dharma says. So Sri Krishna answers the question for Arjuna. He answers when he's Karna. He says, it's very nice that you are talking about Dharma now. I'm glad you
Yeah.
have remembered Dharma. But where was Dharma when you instigated Duryodhana, you know, to get Draupadi and disrobe her? Because it was
Yeah.
Karna's suggestion. Because
Absolutely.
that is the thing. People don't know that. Maybe not everybody knows that, but Karna was instrumental in that disrobing. He
Hmm.
was the one who suggested it. So Sri Krishna says, where was your dharma then? Right? Where was your dharma when you ganged up and killed Abhimanyu, who was without a weapon?
Hmm.
Right? And the person who shot the first, there was a gang of all these people
Yeah.
who killed Abhimanyu, and the person who shot the first arrow was Karna. He was the one who did it. Was the first arrow on Abhimanyu when he was defenseless.
Hmm.
So he reminds him of all the things that Karna did, you know, that was against Dharma. And Sri Krishna says that, we have a thing that uh, if you protect Dharma, Dharma protects you.
Protects you.
Yes?
Right.
So that is part of our Sanatana Dharma, is that Dharma is something that protects you if you protect it. If you are an adharmi, right, then in your hour of need, Dharma is not coming to protect you,
Hmm.
basically. So he says to Karna that you cannot start pleading Dharma when you have not practiced Dharma your entire life. So
Hmm.
unlike the TV version in the Mahabharat, Karna is not a hero. Huh? He is a villain. He's a
Right.
villain in the sense that he's very jealous, and he's got a lot of potential, but he's got this dark side to him. So two of the worst things in the Mahabharata were instigated by Karna: the disrobing of Draupadi and the killing of Abhimanyu.
Abhimanyu.
These are the two of the darkest things that took place, and both
Absolutely.
Karna was responsible.
I think it's a discussion for some other time.
Yeah,
Let's come back to
come
Ramayana.
back to
So,
Ramayana.
uh, so talking about Dharma again, right? And what you mentioned about uh, how Ram was the epitome of Dharma. So there is
Yeah.
this again. Correct me if I'm wrong somewhere. Again, that episode where Ram wins the overall battle, then Sita comes in the Agnipariksha episode, right?
Hmm.
Wherein then again there is a debate that one side will say that Ram did right
Hmm.
because Sita was with Raavan for so much time, so he has his doubts. But the second part too is what I think is the actual part, what is written in Valmiki's Ramayana. It was Ram who had foreseen that people will question
Yeah,
that what if that some she has been living with Ravan and all that. So
absolutely.
Ram
Yeah.
had seen that beforehand, and that's why he had no doubt about Sita. Because as per him they are one. There is no difference between Ram and Sita. Just
He says
because,
that also. He
yeah,
says
just
it
because,
also. Yeah.
absolutely. So just because he didn't want anyone else to question, he created that overall episode of wherein Lakshman had to burn that pyre, and Sita goes into that, and then Agnidev comes out with Sita. So
Mhm.
could you please explain this was a very loose translation of overall what
No,
happened.
no, it's good. It's a good thing to discuss. So, what happens is we have to back up a little bit to know
Hmm.
how much he loved Sita. Sri Rama absolutely adored his wife. He was in that day and age where men
Hmm.
married many women. He had only one wife, and he had did not look at another woman ever.
Hmm.
So, now you might think, okay, because now we all, most people have one wife. But in those days, it was unusual. It was
Right.
huge that he had only one wife. Now, when she was kidnapped, if you read those passages from Valmiki Ramayana, you see he was completely broken. He completely lost it. In fact, he
Yes.
tells Lakshman, he says, you go back to Ayodhya. I cannot leave without getting my wife back. I cannot live without her. He says, she is part of me. Now, he could have gone back to Ayodhya. If
Hmm.
he knew she was kidnapped, he knew that she was with this Raavan, right? Jatayu told him that. So he knew. He did not care. He wanted her. So, anybody who says he has ego issues and all this,
Hmm.
they're grossly misreading, and they're probably not reading the original text,
Original
because
version.
that's
Yeah.
not what you'll get from the original text. So, anyway, so the whole time that he's looking for her, all he can think about is her. Every day he cries thinking about her. Every day he's like, when will I be with her again? When will I have her
Hmm.
back again?
Hmm.
This is all he says. Now, fast forward to this when he wins the battle
Hmm.
and she's coming. Then it's very odd that when she comes, he says, now we can't live together anymore. He says that to her. He says,
Yeah.
he calls her Devi, he calls her lady, like putting a distance, and he says that we can't live together anymore. I did all this out of duty, but we
Hmm.
can't live together anymore because after all, you have lived in the house of another man. So, but he does say one thing. He says, you are like a lamb to a blind person. So it's a hint there to her that the fault is not with her. The fault is with people who are blind to her goodness, blind to her purity. So he gives her that hint.
Okay.
But she gets very upset naturally that
Yeah.
she's being rejected. And she says that, why did you even come here to rescue me? You could have just gone
Hmm.
back to
Hmm.
Ayodhya. If you didn't want to reunite with me, why do you rescue me? She gets furious, actually. And she says, you are talking to me like an ordinary man talks to an ordinary woman. I'm not an ordinary woman. I'm Bhumija. I'm born from the earth. So, don't compare me to this any ordinary women who might be of loose morals, So, don't. He's absolutely silent, right? And then she says to Lakshman, she says,
Lakshman.
uh, Somitre, oh, Somitri, she says, Somitre, Chitam, Chitam me kuru. That means make me a pyre. So she tells him to make a pyre. He never says to her to do
Hmm.
Agnipariksha. She says, and the reason she says that is she says, I want to prove myself. I want to prove my purity. So it was her decision, right? So she goes through the fire, she comes out unharmed, and Agni Dev carries her out like a father carries his daughter. And he says to Sri Ram, he says, here is your Sita. I am Sakshi because, Agni is a universal
Hmm.
Sakshi. I am Sakshi that she is completely pure, right? And you know what he says? He says, I know that. He says,
Yeah.
I didn't do this for me. He says, I didn't do this for me. He says, I know that she's so pure that Ravan could not have touched her. She has her tejas. The word he uses is tejas. Her tejas is so powerful that I know Ravan couldn't have touched her. So it's not for me. He says, I am doing this because other people will talk, and you cannot stop
Yeah.
people from talking. He says he did it more to protect her from wagging tongues. So he says that I have no doubt. He said, in fact, he says she is Vishuddha Trishu Lokeshu. Vishuddha means purest of the pure. In the three worlds,
Okay.
he says she is Vishuddha Trishu Lokeshu. So he had no doubt about her. And he never did it for himself. He did it for her because he knew that they're going back to Ayodhya. And what happens when they go back?
Hmm.
Actually, what he feared actually happened. Despite this whole Agnipariksha, people started talking. But the fact is, that's what he was trying to prevent. Unnecessary gossip, and which would be hurtful to her.
Absolutely.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine if people start saying all sorts of, look at us even in our day and age today. If somebody says something bad about you, male or female, actually,
Mm-hmm.
how hurtful it is, you
Yeah.
know? If they start trolling you and you get upset.
Yeah.
And obviously, this was something he was concerned about, that, what will happen to her. Because he knew she was pure, but people may not, you know, think the same way. So it was not out of ego, and it was certainly not for her to test her purity or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. But you see, unfortunately, that is twisted and communicated that way, and then people misunderstand it. And mostly, if you go by hearsay, that's what you'll think. But when you
Right.
read the original, it's a completely different story.
So different versions, different part of the country, and different stories have come up. I
Yeah,
mean, probably revolving the core message has been same, but it has been depicted in a very different manner in different parts of India.
correct.
So, because every part has the local dialect, I mean, local translation of Valmiki's Ramayan,
Yeah,
some loosely translated, and there are translations of the translations. So
true,
that's where
true.
the original story has been diluted in
Right,
some other way. Okay,
right.
so 12 plus years of research into Ram, Dharma, Ramayana, and everything. So, what has been the core message? What's that? Two three top things uh, that have inspired you the most, or have fascinated you the most from Ramayana or the
So
life of
what
Ram?
what is really fascinating about him is that he teaches you how to handle disappointment in life. You see,
Okay.
all of us, when things are going well, we have no problem, right? The
Hmm.
moment something doesn't go to plan, we get all bent out of shape. That's our human nature, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We can't deal with it. We cannot deal with anything that is doesn't go right in life. And you see he's an example of how to handle a situation which is so terrible. Look at the kinds of things that he handled in life and continued to soldier on without crumbling. So, right when beginning with the exile, right, right when he was about to be crowned, king of that amazing empire, 1 minute going to be a king, next minute without anything, sent to the forest without a penny, like a pauper,
Yeah.
literally. Yeah, from from emperor to pauper kind of situation. And how does he handle it? These are lessons that are very powerful. And when we read the story, we know that, but there is a beauty in that is conveyed in the original. And in fact, my writing, the reason why I wrote this book is, despite
Hmm.
there being so many versions of Ramayana, is because I wanted to capture the authentic feeling from Valmiki's Ramayana and communicate it in English that is enjoyable and easily readable. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to communicate the message as authentically as I could. So I have not deviated from the story. It's not my take on the Ramayana. It's not my version of any of the characters. It's not what I think. It's what Valmiki intended. I have tried to communicate his intention as best I can without. So
Okay.
I've not diluted his message. Is what I'm trying to say.
So, which all scriptures do you have to read before you could, come out of this book? The original scriptures that you read.
Well, I'll tell you. Our Sanatana Dharma is based on the Veda, right? That's the philosophy.
You're right.
And what part of the Veda? The Upanishads, which is the philosophy of the Veda. The entire philosophy can be summed up in two words: Aham Brahmasmi. That is, I am the consciousness. Which consciousness? The one consciousness which powers this whole universe, right? That from that consciousness, everything comes. You,
Right.
me, the tree, the sun, the moon, the animals, everything, even a little ant, is actually just that consciousness in a form. That's what is the basis of Sanatana Dharma, which means that we are all actually one. There is no difference between us. The difference is only what they call in Nama Rupa, in name and form. So, in essence, we are all one Atma. We're not different, which is why the word soul doesn't really apply. It's Atma is always translated as soul, but it's actually
Yes.
not soul, because Atma is that one consciousness, because there is only one, right? There's only one power. You can call by many names. You can call it whatever you like, that power. You can envisage it as, you know, Krishna, as the Shiva, as whatever, Vishnu,
Various other
whatever
forms.
form you like. But the power is one. It is only one. And from that one, everything comes. So this is the only thing that is there in the entire Vedic philosophy. But it's such a simple thought, it takes lifetimes to understand and to come to terms with, to really absorb this, that we are all one. If you absorb this fully, actually you have moksha. You can get moksha just from this. Because if you truly understand it, your behavior will be in accordance with that. You'll be in
Okay.
harmony.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm
Uh,
going off on a tangent, but basically
no, 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 no. Absolutely. Absolutely.
that is the message that is
Huh.
there in every shastra. Every shastra communicates the same message of oneness, whether it's the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or the Puranas or the Veda or whatever. Any shastra is trying to, at its core, is communicating this message of Aham Brahmasmi. That
Okay.
is it.
So let's talk a bit about then Lord Ram's exile. I think that's one of the biggest because you also mentioned that he, accepted everything with a smile on his face.
Mm.
So because he did not accept, he was not disappointed. He accepted everything. So let's talk about the exile a bit, not in really
Different.
depth.
No, sorry, I have to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Not that he wasn't disappointed.
Hmm.
He accepted it despite disappointment.
Okay. Okay.
You see, there's a difference. Of
Right.
course, he was disappointed, but despite and the other thing with the exile is
Hmm.
it was not forced on him. It was his choice. His father told him,
Hmm. Hmm.
don't go. His father didn't tell him, I've given a promise, now you better go. No. His father said, I was a fool to give the promise to Kaikeyi. I should not have given her that promise. And if I was foolish enough to give her the promise,
Hmm.
doesn't mean you have to fulfill that promise. You don't go. His father told him not to go. His mother told him not to go. Guru Vashish told him not to go. Everybody told him not to go. Yet he went, despite the disappointment, despite have giving up what was so how difficult that is. And why did he do it? Because for dharma. He says, he said that, I cannot allow a promise that my father has given to be falsified. My father has given his word. If that word is not upheld, then
Right.
I cannot allow. That's an adharma, and I cannot allow him to do that. So he did it for his father's sake. So that was the
Okay.
greatness. That despite disappointment and everything, to still do the right thing. See, that's for, if you look at us,
Hmm.
I'm just saying, normally, it's very hard for us to do something that is against our interest, our personal interest. In this day and age that we are in, we always put our personal interest first. And if we do something, so long as it doesn't harm our personal interest, yes, we'll do it. But the
Right.
moment our personal interest is harmed, then we back off. No, 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 this we can't do. He did it against his personal interest for dharma, to uphold his father's promise. That was his greatness. If you think how many people can do that,
No one.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Uh, let's talk about the exile a bit. What,
yeah,
where it started and where it ended. I mean, the end is always obviously the war, but how it
yeah.
started and what path was actually followed during this overall exile.
So he left from Ayodhya, as
Hmm.
you know. Then he first thing place he goes is a place called Sringaverapura, and that is it's a little sort of a village kind of place, but it's
Hmm.
the Nishad tribe. They are hunters and fishermen. The Guha was their chief. Now Guha was a friend of his, of Sri Rama, great
Okay.
friend. And this is another thing. When he reaches there, Guha comes to greet him. And he comes, and it's interesting, he gives him a big hug. He says, "Welcome, my friend," and he hugs him. So, because Guha hugs him, that
Hmm.
means they had a good friendship. Because you don't go hugging somebody unless you know them well,
Right.
right? And this is another example to show how he treated everybody as equal. See, he never thought, "Oh, this I'm this great king, and he's
Hmm.
just a tribal person." No, he was absolutely his friend. They were on equal terms because Sri Rama never discriminated. He never discriminated against anyone as high and low. For him, everybody was the same. So anyway, he goes to there, and then after that, he goes to Rishi Bhardwaj's ashram. And Rishi Bhardwaj directs him to Chitrakoot. And then
Okay.
he goes to Chitrakoot. Then Bharat comes there to Chitrakoot and tries to get him to come back to Ayodhya. That whole episode. And then he feels that, he needs to move deeper into the forest because now everybody knows where he is. And he didn't want them to keep coming. Chitrakoot
Hmm.
was not that far away from Ayodhya. It was
Okay.
still an area where, close enough for people to keep coming. And he did not want that. He said that no, Bharat is the king, and the people should, not keep coming to him because then that's dilutes the power, right? So
Yeah.
he goes deeper into the forest, and there he meets. First, he meets Rishi Atri and his wife Anasuya, and they spend a night there, and then they go even further into the forest, and then finally they end up in Panchavati, which is modern day Nasik.
Nashik.
And they end up there, Panchavati, because it has 5 Vat Vriksh, so that's why it's called Panchavati. That
Okay.
little place where they went. They lived there for a long time, and then that's when the Shurpanakha episode takes place, and then the war with Karan Bhushan. because she tries to attack uh, Sita, and then when she tries to attack,
Hmm.
then Lakshman cuts off her nose and ears, and then she goes complains to her cousins Karan Bhushan. They come and have a war. Then Sri Rama kills all of them. 14,000 of them he just
Okay.
decimates single-handedly.
So this is
And
14. This number is written in the actual text.
14,000, 14,000
Okay.
Rakshasas. Yeah, he kills 14,000. Then one of them escapes. He kills
Hmm.
them all, and one escapes. So actually 13,999, I guess he kills
Okay.
because one escapes.
Yeah, yeah.
And that guy's name is Akampana. So he goes first to Raavan. Before Surpanaka, Akampana goes
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
And he says, this is the other great thing about Sri Ram, is his enemies praised him. When you're such a great person, you're such a stellar human being,
Hmm.
that even your enemy can't help but praise you. So he says to Ravan, "Oh, this the greatest of archers." He says that this we've been destroyed. 14,000, because that place was an outpost for Ravan. Actually, he had set up Kar and Dushan and
Hmm.
all. That was an outpost for him. So all these people were his people who were killed. So Kampana says he's the greatest of archers, and he's he's very skilled, uh, unequaled in battle. He goes on praising him. So you can imagine what kind of
Right.
person Sri Ram was. Anyway, then Shurpanaka comes after that, you know, and tells him. And then he goes to Marich, to his because Marich is actually given up. Oh, before that, when Vishwamitra, you know the story, right? So
Yes,
I'm
yes,
going
yes.
back and
So
forth.
we are not going to the story today, the detailed story.
Yeah.
Let's just cover it overall.
Yeah. So Maricha had been thrown into the sea by Sri Rama when he was 12 years old,
Hmm.
right? When he went to protect the yagya that Vishwamitra was doing. So Maricha, after that, had given up all his bad ways and he was doing some tapasya in a cave. But was very good at changing his form. He was very good at this disguise.
Right.
That's why Ravan goes to him and he says, "Listen, I want you to help me." And he also praises Ram. You know what he says? He says that Ramo Vigrahavan Dharma, which means Rama is the embodiment of Dharma. Can you imagine
Okay.
your enemy saying that? Ramo Vigrahavan Dharma. So you can imagine.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then uh, Ravan doesn't agree to him. He says, in fact, I'm not going. Marich. He says, please don't ask me to do this job. He's very powerful, and he's not going to allow anybody to live after if you take his wife. He loves his wife. He don't even try it. But Ravan doesn't listen. He forces him. He says that listen, if you do, basically threatens him, and so then
Right.
Marich has no option, and he goes, and then the whole kidnapping takes place. You know that story,
Yes, yes.
and then he takes her to Lanka.
Okay.
But there is no
So
Lakshman Rekha there.
yes, I was actually about to come there. So this is what we also discussed, during my podcast with Vikrant ji. So he also mentioned that this overall Lakshman Rekha thing that he draws out there and everything, which is also shown on TVs and all the series and
There's some
everything.
Manja
So
and
it's not,
Raza.
so it's not actually there.
No.
So okay. So
So why does he?
how did this get Lakshman Rekha then story get added? So this
I'll
is
tell you
overall that part of dilution.
that was see over this is written like
Hmm.
how many this Ramayana was 7,000 years ago. It was
Hmm.
composed. After that, people have retold it and they have added stuff to it
Hmm.
and they have changed it. So this Lakshman Rekha is a much later addition. It's not something that's there in Valmiki. So in Valmiki, what happens is when that Maricha shouts out, "Hey Sita, hey
Hmm.
Lakshmana, hey Sita," he calls out,
Yeah.
right? So when he calls out, then Sita ji gets very agitated. She says to Lakshman, go now. Your brother is in trouble. They loved each other
Yeah,
tremendously.
yeah.
So she could not bear the thought that he's in some trouble because of the cry, in his voice.
Hmm, hmm,
It was a fake thing, but she did not know that. It sounded exactly like him. So she says, go, go, go. And Lakshman says, no, 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 I'm not going. My brother has told me to stay with you. I have never disobeyed my brother. I am not going. I am staying with you. I will not break my brother's
hmm,
command. He's told me not to go. She says, no, you must go. Then she says a whole lot of things to him, which are very hurtful to him. She accuses him of disloyalty and this and that because she's angry, and she wants him
right.
to go. So she says all these things, and then Lakshman gets so upset. He just says namaste to her and he says, let the one devta protect you. I have to go because you have said some things to me which I cannot hear. What you have said to me, she accuses him of a lot of things. And
Hmm,
he says, it's like molten arrows in my ears, your words. I cannot hear them. And so I'm going, bye bye. Literally, he says namaste and goes. No Lakshman Rekha, nothing. And when Ravan comes, you know how in the movies they show that, okay, she's inside the
hmm,
Lakshman
hmm,
Rekha, then she wants to give him the fruit from outside, then he says, no, I'm not going to accept it like this. You have to come out and do it with, give me some respect. You can't disrespect me by just literally throwing the food from
hmm.
inside. You have to come out and, that's what they show in
Right.
the movie. And then he kidnaps her, right? No, that's not what
Yes,
happened.
yes.
So he comes dressed as a sannyasi.
Hmm,
And in those days, it was Atithi Devo Bhava. And
right.
Atithi is a Tithi, a person who comes without a date. That's the meaning of Atithi. Not
Yeah.
not a guest you have invited. Uninvited guest is an Atithi. Someone who just turns up on your doorstep. So in those days, if someone came on, especially if it was a sannyasi or a rishi or something, you have to do your adar satkar. You have to look after them. You have to give them hospitality. Which
Hmm,
hospitality means you wash their feet, you give them fruit. There's a whole procedure in that. And so she does that. You know, she calls him in. She gets him to sit down. She gives him the fruit. She does all that thing, and she says, "Very nice that you have come to our hut. My husband and my brother-in-law, they've just gone out. They'll be coming soon. Please wait. They'll be very happy to meet you." This is what she says, and they're chatting. And then he's talking to her. He says, "Oh, but you're so beautiful. What are you doing here in this
hmm.
forest alone like this?" Then she tells him her whole story of the exile, of
Okay.
everything. So they're chatting. Then suddenly he says, "Actually, I'm not a sannyasi. Actually, I am Raavan of Lanka. And I have this golden kingdom. And I am here because I'm attracted to you and you're a beautiful woman. And you should not be here in the forest. You come with me, I'll make you my chief queen." And then she gets furious with him. She says, "What do you mean? I'm a married woman, and I'm, how can you talk to me like this?
Right.
Get out." She tells him. Then he says, tries to tempt her,
Hmm, hmm.
with all his riches and everything. And she refuses, absolutely refuses. She says, "Just leave. If my husband comes here right now, he'll put an end to you. You please go." And that's when he kidnaps her.
Okay.
He says, "Okay, if you can't come, willingly, I'm taking you by force." And he picks her up and he puts her in his that Vimana and he takes her.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's a very different story from the one that you see on TV.
Right. So I think this was again during my discussion with Vikrant ji. Maybe I could be loosely translating it. This overall Lakshman Rekha thing got added later because it has always been a patriarchal society wherein the men are supposed to protect their women, protect the women of the household, provide for them, and women are to live within the boundaries of the home. So that's where I think somewhere this overall Lakshman Rekha thing got added, that she needs to stay within the boundaries of the home, not come out, else there would be dangers of the society and all those things. So
Mhm.
very loose translation of what I could make out
It
of
could
my
be
discussion.
because, you see, there's a big difference between the
Hmm.
status of women in Vedic times and in later times.
Hmm. Hmm.
In Vedic times, women had a very high status,
Right.
very high status, actually higher than we have now, honestly speaking. I
Absolutely.
was really surprised. Even in the Ramayana, when this exile happens and everybody is trying to tell Sri Ram not to go, and he says, "No, I'm going." Finally, Guru Vashisht, what he says? He says, "Okay, if you have to go, you go. Let Sita stay back. Why? She can rule in your place. Why can't she sit
Oh,
on the?" Do you know this is in Valmiki Ramayana?
this is absolutely new to me.
It is in Valmiki Ramayana. So that is
Okay.
the status women had. He said, "She's your wife, right?
Uh-huh.
So you and she, you're like one. So you go if you have to go. Let her stay back and sit on the throne." She says, "No, I'm going with him." That's another matter. That was her
Right.
choice. But Guru Vashisht wanted her to sit on the throne. And that's very
Oh,
much there in Valmiki Ramayana. It's actually fascinating when you see
okay.
that.
Okay.
That was the status of women.
Okay. Now let's talk about the favorite, my favorite part of the Ramayana, the Hanumanji story.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
the overall Vanaras. Now,
Yeah.
when we talk about the Vanara clan, right? So we are basically very loosely saying we are talking about the monkey tribe, right? If we translate it that way. So how what is the difference, talking about generic monkeys and the Vanara tribe overall? So are they human? Are they animal? Or what exactly is that? Or are they divine form of something? What is
So,
there in the Valmiki Ramayana?
yeah, Valmiki Ramayana, the first of all, the word Vanar
Hmm.
is a combination of one plus nar. So one is forest and nar is man or
Man,
person.
human
So
being.
they were forest men or forest people,
Forest dwellers, basically.
forest dwellers, forest people, forest dwellers.
Huh.
Nowadays, forest men is not politically correct, I believe. So you just say forest dwellers or forest men and women, whatever you like. But anyway,
Huh.
they were not monkeys.
Okay.
In Valmiki Ramayana, they're not depicted as monkeys. They're depicted as forest dwellers,
Okay.
right? Now, were they human? If you ask me, probably yes. Were they a species of human? Probably yes. Were they like Homo sapien? I don't
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
But there were many species of humans, right? Of,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
there's like
Right.
Neanderthals were also there. There were, I don't know, I don't even remember. But there are many, many types of. In the end, now we are the only ones left.
Right.
There's only one species left. But in times gone by, there were many. So they could have been. This
Hmm.
is just speculation, huh? Not, they could have been uh, a human species, but that were maybe not Homo sapien because they had tails. So maybe they were a species that retained the tail. We also have a tailbone, actually.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
still have the tailbone. We don't have the tail, but we have the tailbone. And maybe they were a species of humans that retained that tail. I don't know. But what they were not was animals. They were not monkeys. And there's
Okay.
a reason for that because I'll tell you why. From the story, they're not monkeys. One is the customs they followed were all the Vedic customs. If you see the coronation and the
Hmm.
wedding and the death ceremony and all that is done, they do, animals don't do that, right? Then when Vali talks with Sri Ram and sort of accuses him of killing him unfairly, he cites the Shastras. Now, which animal will know the Shastras? Right? So obviously,
Okay.
they were, Then when Sri Ram sees Hanuman for the first time, when they meet for the first time, he says, and he says, Nan Rigveda Vinitasya, Nan Yajurveda Dharinaha, Na Samaveda Vidushaha, Shakyam Evam Bhashitum, which means that someone, looking at Hanumanji, he says that someone who has not imbibed the humility of the Rig Veda or has memorized the Yajur Veda or is a scholar in the Sama Veda cannot speak like this. So that means he's saying that he was a Veda Pandit.
Right.
Now, how can a monkey be a Veda Pandit?
Okay.
He cannot. He has to be that. And one more thing. Later, when Bharat meets Hanuman, after when Sri Rama sends Hanuman to Bharat to check whether Bharat wants him back. He doesn't want to come if Bharat is not wanting to give up the throne. He just sends him to check. Bharat is so happy with the news. He tells Hanuman, "Oh, I want to give you so many brides. I want you to marry so many women, from Ayodhya." Now, if he was a monkey, how will he be marrying human women? Obviously, that's not possible.
Okay.
So they were not monkeys.
Okay. So how is then the overall form depicted in the Valmiki Ramayana? You said that they had tail, they are in a human form. So all this swinging around the trees were they as a, I mean, because uh, now in this form probably without a tail and everything swinging, and the obviously the human capacity has come down a lot, right? The heights and all the physical capacities have come down. So do you mean to say, or the, I mean, what our scriptures meant to say, that they were probably a higher form of human being where they are higher physical capability, they were more powerful, and hence they had that tail and that natural swing, they could just since they lived in the forest, they developed that capability to just swing around the overall forest through the trees.
They don't really describe them as swinging through the forest
Okay.
in this. They actually live in a nice little town, you know.
Okay.
The Kishkinda is a nice little town,
Uh-huh.
and it's got the houses are in caves, but they are like dwellings, and
Okay.
it's not you don't feel that they are monkeys at all or any kind of animal. They are described as they looked different in the sense they had maybe some kind of like facial features were a little ape-like maybe. So that's why I feel maybe they
Okay.
were a different species of human. Maybe not Homo sapien, maybe a different species of human. I don't know. Could be. So,
Okay.
every now and again I read that, oh, they discovered the bones of this different kind of human. And they do discover that there was this species and that species. So maybe they were a species that were different looking from us, but they were still a human species. So, humans and like Homo sapiens and Neanderthals,
Hmm.
they did interbreed.
Okay.
So it is possible between different species of human beings to still interbreed.
Has the power of the physical capacity or the strength of this clan has been anyway, detailed in the Valmiki Ramayana? I
Yeah,
mean,
they were very
how?
strong. They were
Okay.
incredibly strong, the Vanaras. And in fact, in first of all, they built that Setu.
Hmm.
We call it Rama Setu, but Sri Rama called it the Nala Setu because it was Nala who built it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So he was a great leader, Sri Ram, and he would never take credit for things that his people did. So he gave due credit. He says, this is the Setu that Nala built. He calls it, it's like the Nala Setu. Anyway, so when they build it by picking up big logs of trees, big trees, they literally uprooted them and laid them down, and big boulders they placed there, stones and boulders and all that. That requires brute force. Then in the battle, in the final, in the Yuddhakand of the Valmiki Ramayana, that the big battle, the Ravan's army, they had weapons. The Vanaras had no weapons. So, like we always see Hanuman with a gada, going around with a gada. In Valmiki Ramayana, he didn't have a gada. Okay, so
Okay.
what they fought with their claws and their brute strength. So they had nails, sharp nails, and they had real strength. So they would like pick up, uproot trees and use that as a weapon, or they would pick up a weapon that was on the battlefield, but they didn't have weapons of their own. So they
Okay.
had to have, and they would also throw boulders at people,
Right.
at
Right.
big boulders. You have to have strength
Uh,
to pick up those boulders. So that is very
Absolutely.
clearly detailed that they were incredibly strong, stronger than human
Okay.
beings, a regular human being.
Okay. So, were they stronger than the Rakshasas that have been depicted in the Valmiki Ramayana? The troop of overall Ravan and
In
everyone?
brute force, yes. If you're talking about just
Okay.
physical strength, yes,
Ha ha ha.
except for Kumbhakarn. He was the only one who would probably be physically stronger because he was so huge, right?
Right.
He was a giant.
Right.
So, other than him, just any regular Rakshasa,
Hmm.
if they were like in a hand to hand combat,
Hmm.
a Vanara and a Rakshasa, the Vanara was much stronger. The
Okay.
Rakshasas had weapons.
Okay.
They had all those bow and arrow and all these weapons which the Vanaras didn't have. They used only their brute force.
Brute force and the boulders and the whatever was available
Whatever
naturally to
was,
them,
whatever they could lay their hands on, they used.
they used it.
And they
Okay.
uprooted trees. So that
Huh.
also you can imagine. No human being can uproot a tree easily, but they were able
Yeah.
to uproot trees. So they were obviously incredibly strong.
Okay. So, so what is the overall clan of this Rakshasas? How have they been described in and where the now again like how Vanaras have been described as a separate community or separate clan, where the Rakshasas again a separate clan other than the normal human beings
They were
or
they were the descendants of the two brothers, Heti and Praheti. This whole story is given in the Uttarakhand of the
okay.
Ramayana, the origin of the Rakshasas.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
So they were, yeah, a descendants of uh, that clan of people. Yeah,
Okay.
they're different from the Daityas,
Hmm.
which we call the Asuras or whatever. But Asura is actually more a nature than a clan.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's a pravritti,
Hmm, hmm,
a
hmm, hmm.
temperament, that the nature of being, proclivity for doing bad things is an
Yeah.
asura temperament. But actually,
Absolutely.
they were daityas. They were the offspring of Diti, the asura. The Rakshasas were the from Heti and Praheti.
Okay. So you mentioned something about the weapons, right?
Mhm.
That these Rakshasas used. So now what we see in the movies or in the series, web series and everything, two arrows coming, creating spark and all that. So and obviously the Pushpak Viman which has been showcased. So how the weapons have been you know detailed out in the Valmiki Ramayana? What kind of weapons were there? Were they really something really powerful or divine, or they normal weapons made out of what you mentioned about the Vanaras? They use the boulders and the trees. Rakshasa, you mentioned that they use,
Both
and
and
for that
arrows,
matter,
yeah.
Ram and everyone, Lord Ram and everyone used bow and arrows. So, what are the other weapons that have been detailed out? Is there any specific mention of any divine weapon?
Yes, because there are broadly two categories of weapons.
Hmm.
There's the astras and the shastras.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the shastras are like, bow and arrow.
Hmm. Hmm.
Astra is when you imbue that weapon with a divine mantra.
Hmm.
So you take a bow and arrow, right? And you say a mantra, like say, then it can become a Brahmastra. If you
Okay.
say that mantra you have to know the mantra, right?
Right.
Now
Right.
everybody did not know how to wield astras.
Hmm. Hmm.
You had to be a very, very powerful warrior to know astras. Like Raavan knew astras, Ram knew
Okay.
astras, Lakshman knew
Uh,
astras. But Ram and Lakshman learned astras from Vishwamitra. So when Vishwamitra took them for the yagya, to guard his yagya,
hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
after they guarded the yagya, he taught them a lot of um, divine astras. All this
Okay.
Varunastra, Suryastra. There are so many astras, and each astra has a certain effect. Like there's some astras that
Hmm.
make the enemy crazy. They make them start hallucinating.
So, this is what
So
we have been told in the web series as Maya Astra.
there's Maya Astra. There's many astras,
Ha, ha,
many
ha, ha.
astras. So
Okay.
but not everybody had those astras. Not everybody had the knowledge of. To have the knowledge of
Hmm.
astra, you have
Hmm.
to be um, a very talented warrior. You have to
Right.
have a lot of um, what do we say? You have to be very skilled. It was not the ordinary soldiers didn't have astras. So even in the Mahabharata, ordinary soldiers didn't have astras. Huh? So the
Hmm. Hmm.
astras
Hmm.
were only in the hands of those who knew how to use it.
The
And the
great
rule was,
warriors, basically. Huh.
yes, and you're not supposed to fight with
Hmm.
those astras with an ordinary soldier. It's
Right.
unfair, right?
Right. Right.
That ordinary soldier has a bow and arrow and you have an astra. You're not
Hmm.
supposed to use the astra on him. And Drona, the reason why Drona was killed, actually, I'm going back to Mahabharata, was he was using astras on ordinary soldiers. He had turned, in
Okay.
the heat of battle,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
someone like Dronacharya had become like, a little adharmi.
Okay.
He was using astras on ordinary soldiers, which he is not meant to do, you know. Anyway, that's another
Hmm.
story.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
But yes, there's a lot of description of them.
Okay. So, ma'am, before we end today's podcast, right? If you could just quickly give us a brief about the what how Lanka has been described in the Valmiki Ramayana, the Soneki Lanka that we
Yes,
called. Was it actually, made out of gold, or what exactly was, or it was just mineral rich, or it had, gold mines around the place? What exactly? How is that
prosperous.
depicted?
Lanka
Prosperous.
is a
Hmm.
very prosperous place. So everybody in Lanka was well
Hmm.
off. In fact,
Okay.
when Hanuman first sees it, he's absolutely awestruck by it. He says, "What an amazing city!" The it was like the buildings had jewels.
Hmm.
They were it was absolutely like Sone ka Lanka, as they say.
Okay.
Gold was everywhere. Like it was used everywhere
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
decoration, and it was a very prosperous city. So people were well off. So that
Okay.
is the sad part, that Ravan in many ways was an excellent ruler. He was actually a good king,
Huh. Huh.
but he had this fatal flaw of, this lust which pulled him down and it destroyed him completely.
Hmm. Hmm.
If with all his, he had a lot of good qualities as well. Like he was a
Hmm.
good ruler. He was a very talented musician. He knew the Vedas. He had a lot of things going for him, but he was dragged down by being very selfish and self-absorbed,
Hmm. Hmm.
and only interested in his own, uh, his own welfare. He didn't care about somebody else's happiness. It was only himself. If you just think about it, he didn't care about the fact that Sita didn't want him. He wanted her. She said, "Listen, I don't want you." But he was so, self-absorbed that he didn't care about that. He wanted her regardless. And that was the quality that pulled him down.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So he was a
But
good
Lanka was
ruler.
great.
He was a good ruler. The kingdom was good, but as a person, as a
He had this
what we talk
fatal
about
flaw.
dharma and everything, he was flawed. He was a flawed
Yes.
human being.
Not, yeah, he had this, it was a fatal flaw that,
Hmm.
if you have a lot of good qualities and you have one um, attribute which is so negative, it overrides everything else. Then all those qualities are useless,
Right.
you see.
Right.
And that was his problem. In fact, Hanuman says that when he sees him for the first time in court, you know, when he's taken in chains and he sees him, he looks at him and he says, "What a magnificent man. And what a pity," he thinks in his mind, "what a pity that he's gone in the path of adharma. If with all that he has, if he had gone on the path of dharma, he could have been something great.
Absolutely.
But he's went gone on the path of adharma, and what a pity. It's like a waste."
Okay. So before we end today's podcast, I would just like you to, quickly give a message to all the youth. What
Mhm.
uh, and when they read this book, your book, Rama, a man of dharma, what should
Mhm.
they understand? And what should be their takeaway from this?
Well, one thing I think that people should, young people especially,
Hmm. Hmm.
I would like them to read it because it will give them an authentic idea of our heritage. Because this is what our heritage is based on. Really, the values.
Okay.
The values, the dharma, which is which is our whole civilization. Our country, India, is a dharmic civilization. And again, I said dharma is not religion, right?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
right thing to do. It's about values and ethics and the right thing to do. And that's what this book gives you. I've tried to
Okay.
communicate that. And you see the core from which our civilization has come from, the core values
Hmm.
that make us what we are, and that we should actually remember it. Sorry, we've forgotten our values, but hopefully now with the young people getting more interested. In my time, we were not interested, but now I'm so happy to see that young people are interested, and it'll be a revival of uh, our dharma, the dharma of our civilization, which is our greatest gift. Our greatest gift is our dharma. And when we had that dharma, we were at the height.
Yeah.
It's only when we lost our dharma that we went gone down. So
I
hopefully
think
we'll.
with this podcast, obviously we cannot, say that we cannot challenge that we'll bring back dharma or what, but still we can try to instill some of the good things and try to bring some at least some good information to people, what our scriptures had, what our history had. So that's the only effort that we can make from our end. And thank you so much, Priya ma'am, for being a part of that journey. And I really had a wonderful time and we spoke about it. We are not going to give away what we are planning next, but yes, we have something planned on the lines of Ramayana again. And I know that this is not the end of the journey with you. We have so many discussions left with you, so many podcasts to record with you. So thank you so much for the first podcast on the iRonik show. I had a fabulous time. I hope you had a great time too.
Thank you. I enjoyed myself very much. I love talking about Sri Rama, so you can call me anytime and I'll be happy to speak on the subject.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And with that, we end this podcast. Thank you, ma'am.